Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, this is Redberryweo here, and welcome back to another quick Civil Air Patrol video. In today's video, we are talking about cadet staff selections from the senior perspective. And so I will be talking a little bit about selecting like a cadet commander, selecting the rest of the cadet staff, and different approaches that I've experienced on both the cadet and senior member side to give you all a well-rounded perspective of my experiences with it. And if you have any additional experience that may be a little bit different from what I described in this video, please feel free to include it in the comments down below. So let's go ahead and get started. So talking about just generally ways that you can select a cadet commander or like a cadet command staff team, there are a couple of ways that I've seen it. One way I have seen is just senior members make observations in the unit like every week, seeing who's the most responsive to emails, who takes initiative, anyone who might be planning activities or events, getting involved with things outside of the squadron. All those factors come together into evaluating how well-rounded the cadet may be, and if they are displaying the behaviors that you would like to see the cadet commander displaying. And so sometimes units may have a couple of cadets that are all around the same grade, but the ones that really stand out are the ones that are really getting involved, that put a lot of time and effort in. And so by having a cadet who's putting a lot of time and effort into the program, one may put them into the position of cadet commander. Another approach would be a board. And so that would be several senior members who are involved with the program that ask a series of questions to the different applicants and evaluate their responses. For example, if one of the questions asked to the cadet commander applicants might be, what is your long-term vision for the cadet program? It's a very broad question. Some of them may go into how they want to develop future leaders by emphasizing taking initiative and providing lots of leadership opportunities. Some of them may talk about the 3 different missions of Civil Air Patrol, but depending on what the priorities of the squadron are, one applicant's responses may be in better alignment than another one's. And there's no right or wrong answer to any of those questions. It's just looking at who has the right fit, who has the skills, both hard and soft skills, like hard skills being knowledge that the applicant has of Civil Air Patrol, its different missions, regulations, pamphlets, guides, anything like that, versus soft skills, which might include communication, presentation skills, and just general charisma. All of those go into factoring where are we at in terms of what we would like to see in the cadet commander. There's also other factors to keep in mind when selecting a cadet commander, regardless of if it's with a board or just selecting someone. And that would be looking at where people are in their school careers and their outside engagements. For example, if there is a really highly qualified cadet major in your squadron, but they're also like a captain for the football team and they're not attending half of your meetings, then that may not be setting the example that the squadron wants to see from the cadet commander. And if there's a sophomore who might be a cadet captain who is highly qualified, but there's a senior who might also be a captain, then you may weigh more heavily on the senior being cadet commander first, because there's still time for that sophomore to have professional development, learn from what that cadet captain who is a senior might do, and take those lessons learned, both positive and negative, of like, I do want to do these things and I don't want to do those other things, and then strongly apply it when serving as one of the future cadet commanders. So it can be a little bit challenging to figure out who you want to serve as cadet commander, and it also depends on how long the terms are going to be. From what I experienced as a cadet commanders at my unit always served for a year. And so they would start sometime in like the June time frame, and then they would step down the following June when school got out. And so then that next cadet commander would step in and then serve, and then they would start training the next person like in the May time frame, and then June would come around and the change of command. Some units I've seen them do for 9 months. Some I've seen for 6 months. One of the challenges of a cadet commander position is that it's expecting phase 4 leadership, which means that it is strategic leadership. And with strategic leadership, it's very challenging to instill long-term changes in just a 6-month period. because normally something I've experienced and I've also observed from some of the cadets that I've worked with is that sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get their footing as a cadet commander, and that's perfectly fine. But if they just get their footing and then they immediately have to step down, then there isn't that really cool period where the team is really performing strong together with a really strong leader, really know where they're going, like the direction that they're going, because the cadet commander has finally like solidified, okay, this is what we need to do, here's how we're going to do it, and just come together as a team. So I think it is good to give the cadet commander enough time to really establish themselves in the position. It's also up to whatever the unit needs. Like if it's standard practice that a cadet commander term is 6 months, but the cadet could also serve again in the future, I mean, that's a thing. And I've also been asked, can people who are below cadet captain serve as the cadet commander? And the answer is yes. And Civil Air Patrol prefers, well, in the regulations it says it has to be cadet second lieutenant or higher. But please know that some units, it might be a chief master sergeant, and you just can't put it into e-services. And one of the reasons why National may not want like a chief master sergeant or a senior master sergeant to be the cadet commander is that they want cadets who are in phase 2 to focus on those larger team tactical leadership skills. Because in phase 3, they're supposed to learn like operational level, where they're learning to delegate really strongly. And then after developing those skills in phase 3, moving on to the strategic level and performing really successfully in that. So Civil Air Patrol wants to make sure that there is the progression between phases, and so by pushing like a phase 2 cadet chief master sergeant into the cadet commander role, there might be concern that that cadet is not getting a full experience with the program. So if you may be in a unit that has a limited number of members or a limited number of options for a cadet commander, there are a couple of choices that you can make. One of them is to put the most senior cadet or one of the most senior cadets that might be a cadet chief master sergeant into the position of cadet commander. There's nothing wrong with it, and they're probably going to get their Mitchell soon, right? So as long as they get their Mitchell within a reasonable amount of time, that's not really a huge concern. There's also the option of having the CDC serve as the cadet commander. And I've seen units where the CDC has served as the cadet commander, and I would recommend against it unless you really don't have any cadets who are ready for the role. Like, if you have a really mature chief master sergeant, like a junior or senior in high school, who's like maybe has outside experience from Civil Air Patrol, like maybe they're in JROTC, or maybe they do other leadership opportunities like a scouting group of some kind, then they could really excel in the role, and they just have experience outside of Civil Air Patrol. They joined later on in their high school career, and that's fine. But if you really don't have someone who would be prepared to take on those responsibilities, then temporarily having the CDC step in for maybe 3 or 6 months, like a short amount of time, modeling the behaviors they want to see and mentoring a cadet into that position would be ideal. Because the cadet commander position is something that, well, there's only one cadet commander in the unit, and it can be very empowering to cadets to see like a senior cadet and say, okay, that's what I want to work towards. I want to be like Cadet Lieutenant Colonel Smith when I grow up in the CAP program. I don't know. But the thing is that if you don't have a cadet serving in that cadet commander position, then they may not entirely see and envision like, okay, so this is what the role of cadet commander is. So if you already do have a cadet commander, have that cadet commander work with the new cadet commander. Don't have them undermine the new cadet commander because they may have already established themselves as being a really strong leader. Have them take a more backseat role, serve as a mentor, and support that new cadet commander. And if you just don't have the membership, it's okay to have the CDC serve as the cadet commander. It's just that if you do have a cadet that you think might be up for the challenge and they're willing to do it, then I do strongly recommend giving that cadet the opportunity and then working with them so that they become more comfortable and they really succeed and thrive in that role. To talk a little bit about cadet staff selection, so I'm shifting gears here, we're going to talk about different approaches that I've seen with that as well. One of the approaches is just selecting staff and just saying, okay, this cadet will go into that role, that cadet will go into that role, that cadet will go into that role, and then that's it. Sure, that works, but there are additional approaches as well. There is the board approach where cadets go in, they do an interview. It might be with some of the senior cadets, it might be with a couple of senior members, it might be a mix of both. And then they talk about the position that they want to apply for like 5 to 10 minutes, depending on like how in-depth and how high of a leadership role it is. Like if it's a cadet in charge of an entire support team and the support team has 20 cadets in it, you may want a more senior cadet in that OIC position. So there is that approach, and there's also the cadet staff selection exercise approach. And I actually prefer this last option a little bit more because there is a structure that kind of goes along with it, and I'll talk a little bit about this structure. Essentially, you start with looking at what are the traits that you want to see from your cadet staff. And so you might say strong communication skills, you might say problem-solving skills, and let's say for our third one, it might be competency with drill and being able to give commands. You could do anything, but let's go with those three. For the communication skills, you would come up with different observable behaviors that are associated with communication skills. And let's say you could do an impromptu speech exercise for that. You could do like a presentation that they have to prepare ahead of time and then present. There's all sorts of options. It could even be like a written communication exercise where you give them a prompt and they write an essay. It's harder to grade and it takes longer to do, but you could do that as well. There's then the opportunity to see what are the strengths and weaknesses of the cadets in each of those areas, and then place them into positions based off of how they performed. For example, if there is a cadet who has a great deal of, let's say, aerospace knowledge, but they don't necessarily take a lot of initiative in what they've been doing in the program, something you could do is you could pair them with a really strong senior member who's in the aerospace education team and say, hey, senior member, this is a cadet who really knows what they're doing in terms of the knowledge associated with aerospace education, but we really want them to go outside of their comfort zone, take more initiative, and take charge of the lessons when they are happening, in addition to coming up with some really unique ideas to just get creative and do AEX with our squadron. And then pairing that strong senior member with a cadet who has a lot of knowledge but may not have those soft skills developed, they can work together and really combine as a strong team because that senior member might have really great soft skills in addition to the knowledge, so they'll understand what the cadet is talking about, and the cadet won't just be teaching them, but they'll also be able to support one another in creating a really strong aerospace education program. With that communication exercise example, there might be a list of positive behaviors. So let's say if it's an impromptu briefing, then the cadet starts and ends on time. They make eye contact with the audience, and they maybe don't, they do proper, appropriate body gestures and not like going all over the place. Right? So you might have those in a list, and then you would have senior members evaluating or senior cadets evaluating. If you do have that kind of technique, I highly suggest having at least 2 evaluators observing and checking things off, because then you'd be able to average the scores together. And if there's potential personal biases, like if one member doesn't like another member very much, then that doesn't too strongly impact how they performed. And with the approach of doing a cadet staff selection exercise, this could be done by the squadron senior member leadership or the cadet leadership. And the reason why I would have the cadet leadership do it is so that they have ownership over the process. They knew there are people a little bit better by being able to observe, like, here is how this exercise went, and these are the cadets that really stood out in these areas, and then be able to provide feedback afterwards, and even make observations along the way, so then when you later on do those feedback forms, the 60-90 forms, then they'd be able to give feedback and say, well, I remember when we did the cadet staff selection exercise, you had a little bit of a challenge when it came to the communication section and being able to really clearly present your ideas, but now, 3 months later, you're really doing a much better job in being able to outline the information you want to share with other people, give specific details, and summarize your ideas in a cohesive manner. If possible, just in general, my recommendation for both the cadet commander selection and cadet staff selection is to give feedback to the cadets on how they did, because that gives them the opportunity to do better next time and improve in different areas. Like with that example of communication and doing those feedback forms. If you don't give them that feedback after, then they may not necessarily know that they could further improve in their communication skills, or what they would need to do in order to improve. So again, to summarize, there is no right or wrong way to do staff selections. It can be a little challenging sometimes, especially because there are a lot of interpersonal relationships between the members. Some may be closer than others, there might be biases involved, but the important thing is that you put together a team that will best support the direction your squadron needs to go. And so from a senior member perspective, think about what is the strategic plan for your unit. Does your unit have a strategic plan? What are the long-term objectives that you all are trying to accomplish? If you have, let's say, 2 very experienced cadets who are willing to serve in any area, and that could be like public affairs, recruiting, retention, logistics, aerospace education, leadership, like there are so many different teams that they could be part of. Where would you put them? What team needs the most support? Would you put them on a team that has relatively little senior member support available? Would you put them in a team that already has pretty strong senior member support? It's all up to you, because the composition of your unit is what you're going to be working with. And some personality conflicts might also come up, and that might be something to think about. Overall, just think about what will work best for the direction that the unit is going, and how might we support our members best to help them succeed in our organization. If you put a cadet who is not super dedicated to the program into a team they aren't really interested in, as an example, that it might be very challenging to keep that member engaged. So if there are some cadets that are a little bit more open to different experiences, that's also something to keep in mind. Like on an application form, you might ask them a question of, are you open to surfing in a different position than you have listed here? And like on a form, you might have 3 different positions that they can pick, and it's like top priority, like first choice, second choice, third choice. And if they don't get one of their top 3, then would they be willing to serve in something else? And that open-mindedness to different experiences might be a desirable thing you want to further in your squadron. And so by giving cadets different opportunities to learn from different teams and different senior members, those are other factors to keep in mind. So there is no right or wrong way to do your staff selections, but whatever you do, I hope that is successful and that your members are getting the most out of their experiences. So thank you guys so much for watching, and that is all, folks. Until next time, toodles.